introduce the aorists. Mounce moves from the imperfects. I think he does them first because the imperfect is built on the same stem as the present tense. So it's only learning the adaptations that you make for the imperfect. But in reality, the aorist is the main workhorse verb tense in the New Testament. Slightly ahead of the present tense, I think, if we looked at total numbers, not a lot. And there's the default usage for past time. So if one's trying to say something in the past time, your default tense would be the aorist. It simply represents an action as having taken place in the past without telling you too much about the inner workings of that action. It doesn't make any claims about it being ongoing or repetitive. It's simply the fact that it happened. Jesus died, we studied, etc., etc. would be a simple past tense or an aorist tense in Greek. Now, just like English, you get two different ways of creating a perfect tense, an aorist tense. You get a first aorist, which is one form, and you get a second aorist, which is a different form. And a word will only have one of the two forms, same as English. So in English, you form many past tense verbs by adding the letters ed, or something equivalent. So stop or stopped, we've added ed, we've doubled the p, but essentially we've added ed, which is your typical past tense formative for English verbs. But some English verbs form their past tense differently, like the difference between run and ran, where it's not ed that's added, it's some other changes that are taking place. Well, Greek does essentially the same thing. The two ways of forming the Greek past tense or aorist tense are discussed in chapters 22 and 23 of Mounce's textbook. So what we're going to do today is briefly look at the second aorists. Second aorists are formed exactly like imperfect tense forms. The only difference is they are built on a different tense stem. So for a second aorist, the tense stem will be different in the aorist to what it is in the present tense. And once you've isolated the aorist tense stem, the aorist tense, second aorist tenses are formed exactly like imperfects. You add an augment at the beginning to indicate past time. You add the same connecting vowel you would add for an imperfect, so omicron if the personal ending starts with a nu, or epsilon if it starts with anything else, mu or nu, or epsilon if it starts with anything else. And exactly the same endings, the secondary endings that you've been using for the imperfects. So that's pretty much it. My intention is then to go and find some examples and look at how they are built. But before we do that, and while I get myself organized, any questions? Any questions or comments that you want to pursue?
Kevin, I have a question. The augment, when it sits in the middle of the verb, or rather not in front, I couldn't find it. What determines the position of the augment? Because mostly it's in the front, but some of them do appear somewhere along the middle of the verb.
It's always in the front. The ones that are in the middle are not really in the middle. What is happening is that the verb is formed by a normal verb with a preposition prefixed. So you've added a preposition at the start. And the augment will not be attached to the preposition. They're called compound verbs because a preposition is joined to a verb itself. So where you've got a compound verb which is composed of a preposition followed by a verb itself, the augment goes after the preposition at the beginning of the verbal part of the compound. We'll look at a few examples. I'll look for a few as we go along and point out exactly how that is. How do you recognize them? Well, if you know what a preposition is, if you know which are the prepositions, it's fairly easy to recognize when you've got a preposition in compound. For example, the Greek word for I pray is proseuchomai. Proseuchomai. It's made up of pros, the preposition, meaning to or toward, and euchomai, which is the standard word for I pray or I ask. So when those two are put together to mean I pray, pros euchomai, if you wanted to make it past tense, you wouldn't put epsilon in front of pros, because pros is not the verb proper, it's the compounded preposition. You'd put the augment after the pros at the beginning of the euchomai part of the verb. So just look for a preposition in compound. If you see the opening letters of a verb are actually a preposition, then you look for the augment after the preposition and before the start of the word itself, the main verbal part of the compound. Easiest done by keeping an eye open for examples. So I'll keep your question in mind as we look at some examples in the New Testament. Okay, other questions? Make one last try to add Dural and Teboho. And then I'm going to share my screen. So, Blepete?
Blepo?
Polikala.
No.
All right, so we're going to blunder around Mark's Gospel a little bit more. We want to look for verb. Aorist tense. And either active or middle, because we're not doing passives yet. Only indicatives. Go. 490 that match our description. Now we are looking only for second aorists. You don't probably know the difference yet, but that's okay. We'll look for them as we go along. The first one is the second aorist. If I double click, you'll see a definition of the word. So Nico, this is a first example for you. You can immediately recognize that ace is a preposition. So if we look at our dictionary form, you can see ace and then a verb that you've already learned, erchomai, meaning I come. Ace means into, so ace erchomai means I come into or I enter. I come into or I enter. Our present tense stem would be ace erch, because these are our suffix for the present tense. So our present tense stem is simply ace erch. Now look what happens to this. The future tense goes to ace elus. In other words, there's a complete change in the future tense stem. It doesn't look anything like the present tense stem. And similarly, if we find the aorist, it tells us it's a second aorist, and the root form is ace elthon. Actually, the stem of the word is ace elth. So the aorist tense stem of erchomai is elth. And we've got the preposition compounded. All right. So this says kai, ace elth in Palin again, ace synagogue again, into the synagogue, and he entered again into the synagogue. Kai ein eke anthropos, and there was there a man, exeraminen echon tenchera, withered, having a withered hand. Ace elthen, once we've isolated the aorist tense stem being a second aorist stem, is built fairly regularly. So we've got ace, the preposition in compound, and we've got elth, which is the actual verbal stem, and what we've added here is there's our connecting vowel, epsilon. There's no personal ending for the three singular, but there's a movable nu. And when we put all that together, ace remains there. The augment goes over here. So elf becomes elf. Ace elfin, meaning he, she, or it came. Kai ace elfin, he, she, or it came into the synagogue. And there was a man with a withered hand. Questions?
Kevin, is the root differently for Ace Elfin and Ace Erchomai? You spoke about the stem, but the
Yes.
root also seems to be totally different consonants.
I don't know the answer. I mean, certainly it doesn't look like there's a common root. There are a few words in the New Testament that actually have completely different words for the different tenses, and this certainly looks like one of them. So I would suspect the answer is yes. Often that happens when a word that used to occur in more than one tense. So let's say you had erchomai and eluomai, for instance, without that. Let's say you had those two words, both in use, but the present tense of this word drops out and the future tense of that drops out, and then they get treated as if they're one word. That happens a few times. We may be able to find the answer if we come into the more technical work. This is Mounce's morphology book. So, Morphology of Biblical Greek. It's the gold standard of its type. And let's see what we find under Erchomai. That's not going to be it. That's not going to be it. Can you still see the book?
We can. There was just a thing there. The previous highlight that you had that showed the arrow towards Elioth, I think.
All right. I think what I need to do is change my screen share because I've opened the screen to this one. All right. So I'm just going to switch that. Hi, Lucy. Nice to have you with us. All right, so this is the more technical work on morphology, and we're just looking if there's an explanation of the formation of the Erchomai derivatives, how we get the different tenses. Roots ending in a vila, kappa, gamma, or chi, 34. Erchomai. Erchomai uses multiple roots with a blot. Yeah, so Erch, Eluth, and we should have Elf. All right, okay, so what's happening is we've actually got two roots that have come together and are used as the various forms of Erchomai. You can see them listed here as Erch and Eluth. That's enough information, so I'm going to revert to the ordinary one where I can type a bit. Blepete, Pauline?
Blepo.
All right, so what he's telling us is there are two roots for Erchomai. There's Erch, which does duty for certain tenses, and there's Elf, or Eluth. So if we are looking at the future tense, Elusomai, it's formed from this root. We add sigma, the theta drops out. And when we jump down to the aorist tense, you don't really need to know this, by the way. This is a very common word, and it's pretty easily learned just by observation. When we come to the aorist tense, the aorist tense stem is formed from Eluth, but the two middle vowels have ablorted. So Erchomai as a word is based on another word that's got two roots that come together. It occurs very frequently. It's pretty easy to remember. So you remember that eilthon is the aorist tense of erchomai. How it's formed, we're working with the tense stem elf and modifying it like we do an imperfect. Well, there's another one from ekteno. Ekteno. Also, incidentally, Nico, clearly a verb with a preposition in compound. So what's happening is that we are having our augment inserted after the preposition. So ek plus the augment e, and when the kappa of ek has a vowel following, it changes to x, c. So ektenin, where does Mounts deal with liquid aorists? Are they in chapter 22? No. All right. So those are chapter 23. We're not going to worry about this. It's not a second aorist. So the augment would tell me it's a past tense, and we're not going to worry for now about the rest of it. Anechoresen, that's first aorist. Ekoluthesen is first aorist. There's another one. This is a variation again of erchomai. So our stem is elf, our verbal stem. So how do I know this is an aorist and not an imperfect? Well, our stem is elf. There's the augment, the lengthened initial vowel. There's my connecting vowel, omicron, and nu is the personal ending for the one singular or three plural. So this means either I came or they came. How do I know it's aorist and not imperfect? Answer, you have to have memorized that stem would have been in the present tense and therefore in the imperfect. So the imperfect would have been on, so we lengthen that, and for the rest the formation is the same. Here we've got eilthon. What's different is only the stem. So the difference between a second aorist and an imperfect is only the stem. How do you know? You have to have learned the word. So if you don't know that the stem is different for a particular word in the aorist tense, you will not be able to work out by looking at it whether it is aorist or imperfect. The actual suffixes are identical. They just build on a different or modified stem. Katalambanete. Okay, let's try to make sense of this sentence. Eilthon from erchomai, it's aorist, so it's past time, simple past. It means either I came or they came. So I came pros auton to him, or they came pros auton to him. If we look in the broader context, we're going to find a group in the plural. This is something you haven't learned yet. It's a plural participle. It means because they were hearing, hosa epoye, hosa, how many things or how much he was doing, epoye, he was doing. Imperfect, there's our augment, and what we've added is epsilon and iota, or just epsilon actually, so that's an imperfect. We probably looked at it last week. So while they were hearing all the things that he was doing, eilthon pros auton, they came to him. Okay, there's our next one, apen. Apen, interestingly, is listed here as its own word. In practical terms, it functions as the aorist tense of lego. So we will treat leg as the present tense stem and ape as the aorist tense stem. Sometimes the initial epsilon falls away, but we don't need to worry about that for now. So essentially we've got that as a stem, There'll be a good reason why the epsilon sometimes falls away. I would suspect this is a word that originally had a digamma as the start. Let me see if I can confirm that. Yes, that is confirmed. All right, let me just come back to you guys. So our present tense root is leg, and our aorist tense root originally was actually this. It was ep with a digamma, which of course has fallen into disuse. But knowing that the stem was digamma epsilon p, you can see what's happened here. We've added epsilon as the augment at the start, connecting vowel epsilon, no personal ending, but a movable nu for the third person singular, and then because this digamma doesn't survive, it's fallen out, those two have contracted to a. Atalambanete?
I don't know about the other guys, but when you type the explanation in that little box there, it sort of
obscured by the faces. Okay.
Yes.
My apologies. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. All right. So this is another really, really common word. Lego is the present tense stem. You will treat a pen as the aorist tense stem. Effectively, I'll type it again. We've got Lego, and the original root of apen was a digamma epsilon p, and the formation of apen was we added the epsilon, connecting vowel, no personal ending for the three singular, but a movable nu. Notice that this would be omicron if that nu was a real personal ending. You always have omicron as the connecting vowel if you have nu as the actual personal ending, but in this case the ending is non-existent, so that's a connecting vowel for an ending that is no ending. And then what we had was, of course, digamma has dropped out. So the word's gone to that, and then those two have contracted to apen. So that's how we've got there. For practical purposes, you can consider ape as the aorist tense stem. Having considered ape as the aorist tense stem, there's an anomaly. You don't see a lengthening over here. There's no augmenting taking place because you wouldn't augment a as an initial anyway. So essentially, there's our connecting vowel. That's not actually a personal ending, it's just the movable nu. Apen, he said. How do I know it's aorist? You have to know that that is the aorist tense stem. And it's different from leg, which is the present tense stem. In most second aorists, the modification is not as radical as it has been in the two we've looked at. Normally you'll see some of the consonants remaining. In the two we've looked at, we've actually had two different roots that have come together to form the different tenses. Any questions?
Kevin, will we see ape in the text without the movable nu?
You will, but when you see ape, it'll be an imperative most of the time. I can't say all of the time. So the form ape without the movable nu definitely occurs as an imperative. In fact, I can confirm this for you. Let's go and see what we've got. This is a really nice tool, the Lexom Analytical Lexicon. So we want to go, let's see if they're listed under Lego. I'm going to guess that they do. Come on. All right, so forms of Lego, apen, elege, etc. Do we not have? No. All right. Obviously, we've got to go apon as a separate entry. There we go. All right. So let's go and see. This is usage in the Bible and a range of other Christian literature. Epa. So there we do have epe occurring as a verb, aorist, active, indicative, 3 singular. Not often, only one occurrence of it like that. And then we've got epe as a verb, aorist, active, indicative, 3 singular, the only difference being accenting. And this is the imperative. All right, you've got a few more occurrences of the imperative, quite a few. So the form epe usually is the imperative, and epen almost always. It's very common. It looks like there's only one place where it's used without the movable nu. So epe almost always takes the movable nu. And you can see here, the movable nu originally came in only when you had a vowel following, but you can see here, there's no vowel following, but still it's become standard to use epen with the movable nu in place. Let's translate. Kai epen tois mathetais autou. And he said to his disciples, and we won't bother with the rest. Etherapusen is a first aorist. We won't pause there. Yes, up elthon. Up elthon shouldn't pose too many problems. Nico, preposition, verbal root. Okay, preposition and verb proper. Present tense stem is up erg. Let's get that out the way. Our aorist tense stem is up, and remember that our aorist tense stem is elth. Once we've identified that, the formation is quite regular. The augment is the lengthening of epsilon to eta. We add connecting vowel omicron, personal ending nu, which is either one singular or third plural. So up elthon is either, up by the way means from, and elthon, I come or I go. So this means I came or went from, probably in the sense of I departed, to go away or depart. All right, so I went or I departed would be the idea. Kai up elthon, I went or they went. Pros auton, to him. Presumably it's they, describing a group of people, but we'd have to look in context for a third plural subject. Kai anon anabe esto arus. I have to look further than the verse for the subject that was departing to him or going to him. Questions? Happy with that? So there's our augment. How do I know that's the augment and why is it there, Nico? Answer, it's after the preposition in compound.
I got that. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, good. Lucy.
Can I ask for diakone, why does that doesn't seem to be a preposition in compound, but it still seems to have the lengthened vowel for the a rather than at the beginning of the word.
Are you seeing that word or asking it with reference to having seen it somewhere else?
With reference to it's in Mark 1 with reference to the assignment.
Okay, happy to discuss it. So it's dia, ko, neo. So what?
In the assignment. Yeah.
So we're going to try and figure out whether this is a preposition in compound or part of the word. The way you're going to figure that out is if we look at the other forms, and you will have them in Mounts. So let's do it from Mounts, which is the resource that I'm sure you do have. If we go to the principal parts of diakoneo in Mounts, he tends to put the imperfect in parentheses so we can see the augment there. And if we look at the other past tense forms again, we can see the augment there. So it's clear that dia is a preposition in compounding with something. Akoneo. I actually don't off the top of my head know what it's compounding with, but I'm sure we can figure that out with a little bit of effort. So let's jump back to here.
As a verb compound then?
I don't know.
Okay.
Just give me a sec and I'll give you the answer. I know that's not always helpful. One wants to know how we got there. So diakoneo, augmented as a compound verb. 31.6 compound verbs, augment the verb, blah, 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 blah. Just trying to confirm this. I don't know. I don't recognize akoneo or anything similar as a freestanding word. So that's the point of confusion. Let's try this.
I looked up and I think it was a verb akon that was in the biblical Greek, but it's not quite the same stem. And it doesn't really make sense together.
Yeah, no, he's not giving much away yet. Diakonia, diakonos. Okay, let's see if we can find.
But is it ever used as a preposition? Isn't it like just in the usage happens to be a word that you will find in that form, and that's it?
Yeah, it seems to be that way. Contracted diakono. Good question, eh? Where else can we look? And one's instinct is look for ako. Oh, Lucy, I don't know. I don't know what's combining here. I mean, it certainly behaves as if it's a combination of
Yeah.
D and akoneo, but we can't find
Yeah.
akoneo. And even Mounts doesn't say it's a combination. He says it behaves as if it is a combination. But there's no evidence that it is a combination. One more try. Let's try little. Diakoneo, blah, 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 blah. Right, in Liddell there is a verb akonao, meaning to sharpen. And there is a verb koneo, meaning to raise dust or to hasten. I'll try and find out. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. It looks for all the world like it originated as a compound of dia and something, which may well be simply koneo. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, good question. Can't answer you
Okay.
at the spur of the moment. Douglas says, I found it.
Yes, I found it on Bible Hub, and then they did say like the verb were compounded of dia and akoneo, and then it gives a whole.
Right. Okay. So
From
it
Strong's.
behaves. It behaves like that. The difficulty is there is no akoneo. So none of the lexica have a word akoneo.
Yeah, that I also struggle to find akoneo like a, how can I say, definition for that.
Yeah, we do find koneo, which could also be an explanation. It could be dia plus koneo, but that doesn't quite explain. That doesn't quite explain the form. Okay, I'll see if I can find an answer. I don't know more than that off the top of my head. It seems to be somewhat anomalous. Let's continue looking for perfects. That's a first perfect. That is a me verb, so we're not going to go there. That's another me verb. Here's ex-elthon. Ex-elthon is another one of our erchomai compounds. So we would have had ek plus erchomai. We are familiar by now. The root is elth, so it's ex. There's the augment, elth lengthening to elth, connecting vowel, and personal ending. Got my color scheme reversed. This means either I came out or they came out. Hoi par autu, the ones, par autu, with him, ex elthon, came or went out, kratesai auton, to arrest him, to seize him, to grasp him. Elegon, and they were saying, hoti exeste, for he is out of his mind. Alright, that's another verb that we haven't done yet. This is an aorist liquid verb, which we also haven't done yet. You'll do it in chapter 23. That's first aorist. So the majority of aorists, folks, are first aorists, and the ones that are second aorists, a high proportion of them are elthon compounds, which you've already noticed. Okay, there's egenetor. Egenetor is a good example. Egenetor comes from ginomai. So essentially what's going on with egenetor is that the present tense stem is gin and the aorist tense stem is gen. The change is from gin to gen. If we were looking at an imperfect, we would build it on gin. If we are looking at an aorist, we're going to build it on the aorist tense stem gen. And for the rest, this is completely regular. We're going to add the epsilon. So there's the augment. Tells me it's either aorist or imperfect. There's the connecting vowel, epsilon, and the third person singular middle or passive ending, ta. In the aorists, this can only be middle because the aorist passives are formed completely differently. So whereas in the present tense, the middle and passives look the same and context must determine which is in view, in the aorist, this would only be middle. Egenetor, how do I know that that is aorist and not imperfect? Well, I presume the corresponding imperfect form would be a ginetor versus a genetor, and you would have to know the root has been modified. So ginomai changes to, I've already marked it here, changes to gen as its tense stem in quite a few of the forms. Katalambanete? Kai egenetor into sperein. This means and it came to pass or it happened. This is often a translation of an Old Testament Hebrew phrase or a Hebrew expression. Wayehi, meaning and it happened or it came to pass, translated by egenetor quite frequently. So something like and it happened into sperein, in the act of sowing, or men epesen. There's another one. Epesen is a second aorist from pipto. So notice the stem for the present tense would be pipped. The stem for the imperfect is pipped. But for most other tense forms, the stem has changed, and for the second aorist, the stem is pes. So there's our second aorist stem. Second aorist stem, mark it in pink. And then the rest is straightforward. We've got the augment, connecting vowel, movable nu, this is third person singular, epesen, he, she, or it, fell. So kai egenetor, and it came to pass, ento sperein, in the act of sowing, homen, on the one hand, what fell, paraten hodon, beside the road, beside the way or path, Kai elthen augment from elf, the second aorist stem for erchomai, meaning he, she, or it came, ta petena, petena is birds, the birds, kai kat ephagon. Alright, here's another one. Question mark, is this plural or singular? Ta petena, birds.
Plural.
Any? Why is the verb singular?
Because this Greek is like that. No, sorry, Kevin, I don't know.
The Greeks were dumb and they didn't know how to combine their tenses. Singulars and plurals. Why is it singular? So we've got he, she, or it came. Ta petena is clearly the subject. So we know the birds came and devoured it. So ta petena is plural, yet the verb is singular.
Can it be like it's a collective?
No.
Treated as, okay, not. Well, third strike, I'm out.
Anybody else? Douglas?
Can
Lucy?
it be the seed or the sower?
Nope. No, the birds are the subject of the verb came. The birds came and devoured it. So the birds are the subject of two aorist tense verbs here. This one and this one. Is Lucy still with us? You know the answer,
Yes.
Lucy?
No.
Douglas? You know the answer?
Nope. Mm-mm. I thought
All
it was a
right.
collective as well, like Nick.
All right, the answer is that neuter plural subjects can take a singular verb. It's the one exception to agreement in number. So if I open this, you're going to find it's a neuter noun. Petenon uto, meaning any kind of bird, so it's the generic term for bird. Neuter plural subjects often, in fact probably more often than not, take singular verbs. So they do not agree in number with their verb. It is just an anomaly. Okay, so kai elthen and it came, but we would translate it they came, or in this case, the birds came. Kai kat ephagon. Kat ephagon is from kat estheo. Estheo means to eat. So if we take off the kat, you'll see estheo means to eat. Default word for eat. And if I look at estheo, oh, come on, no man, just give us the other forms. You'll see that the aorist becomes fog. So the actual aorist root is fog. The present tense stem, or the aorist stem, is fog. The aorist tense, the present tense stem is esthi. And if we go back, we've got the same thing happening with the preposition kata prefixed. So our word here is originally kata estheo. That alpha's dropped out, or dropped off the kata, because the word started with a vowel. All right. When we come to the aorist tense or the future tense, our root is fog. So our word is kata, fog, and then we've added whatever modifiers we've got. So we're building on the root kata fog, which is the aorist tense of kata estheo. Estheo, to eat, kata down, something like to gobble down. It intensifies it with the sense of to devour. Afrikaans would have a good equivalent. I think the difference between eet and vreet would capture the difference between estheo and kat estheo. If you don't get that for lack of Afrikaans, Doesn't help you, but it'll help some.
The thugs came to eat the seeds.
Yeah, the thugs. I hope my Afrikaans usage was correct. I'm always a bit nervous of commenting on Afrikaans grammar. All right, so what happens here then? We've got kata.
Quite correct.
We add the augment. We keep the stem, fag, right? And then we add connecting vowel, and of course, no personal ending. So those are our building blocks. And then whenever there's a preposition that ends in a vowel, well, most vowels, some vowels will remain, iota will remain, but most vowels, I need to hide you guys again, sorry. All right, so kata plus e plus fag plus connecting vowel plus ending. When there's a preposition ending in a vowel and we then add the augment, the last vowel on the preposition will ablort. It'll fall away. So we've got, that becomes simply kat, e, fag, in. Kat, e, fag, in. And the diagnostics, there is the augment, connecting vowel, and that's a movable noon, not actually a personal ending, although I'm using blue to mark the personal endings. How do I know this is not imperfect? Well, imperfect would be built on the present tense stem, which is kat es thi. So it would probably become kat es theon. Let's see if we can confirm that. They don't normally give the imperfect in the normal listings of these words. Yeah, they don't give the imperfect. Anyhow, it is the reality. The imperfect would be built on kat es thi as the stem, whereas the aorist is built on kata fag as the stem. So that's our stem for the aorist. Second aorists always have a stem that is in some sense modified. We've got time to do one more. We have. Let's go look for one more. There's epesen again. It's from pipto, but the aorist root is pes. Aorist tense stem, sorry, is pes. This looks like a second aorist, but it's actually a liquid aorist. They behave similarly to the future liquid futures, so I'm not going to talk about it. There's epesen again. It fell. Of course, this is Jesus telling the story about the sowing of the seed, so we've got epesen repeated quite a few times. There's a geneta, a very common one. Remember, present tense stem is gin, aorist tense stem is gen, and the rest is pretty straightforward. Augment identifies it as either aorist or imperfect. Connecting vowel, this is middle passive, but specifically middle in the aorists. There's a geneta again. There's apen. So your second aorist's not as common as the first aorists, and what you'll find is that a high proportion of second aorists are made up of a few very common words, versions of erchomai, eilthon, often with compounds. This word apen, which is the second aorist of lego, egeneta, apen again, eilthon again from erchomai, ace eilthon. Don't need to stop and do these, you pretty much know them. The others that we see marked are all first aorists. Alright, there's a second aorist. The change is minor in this case. So the thing with the second aorist is there's always a change to the tense stem. You can see here that our present tense stem would be fug. This means to flee. Our present tense stem would be fug. Our aorist tense stem is fug. There's our aorist stem. What's happened in reality? The root of the word is fug, and the present tense stem has been formed by adding the epsilon to its stem. But as far as building the two past tenses of the Greek verb, the imperfect and the aorist, the imperfect would build on the present tense stem fug. So if I wanted to make this imperfect, it would have been e fug on, meaning they or I, let's say they were fleeing, but efugon simply means I fled. This one's continuous or ongoing or repetitive. This one is a simple declaration of the fact that the act happened. Try and read the sentence. It's a plural, so this, which could be first singular or third plural, is clearly a third plural. Kai hoi boscontes, the ones who were grazing, hoi boscontes. No doubt the story where the pigs go charging down the hill. Seemingly a fitting Freudian slip there. Kai hoi boscontes autus efugon. Kai up. Ah, there's another second aorist. Okay. All right, so the ones who were grazing fled. Not were fleeing. There was no duration or continuity or repetition. They fled. Okay, this would point back to something in context which we don't have. It's going to point to the pigs, but we don't have a context just looking at one verse. All right, here's another one. This is not really a second aorist. It's actually a liquid aorist, so we'll talk about those another time. So essentially your second aorists, you're looking for a modified root or a modified tense stem actually, where the present tense stem and the aorist tense stem are different. The second aorists are then built in very much the same way as the imperfects are built. How do you recognize them? You have to know which words have different tense stems in the aorist tense from the present tense. The good news is that the overwhelming majority of the second aorists are in fact a handful of common words, variations of elthon, often with prepositions apen, eden, which is the past tense of blepo, and ginomai, egeneto, the variations of that. So if you learn a few keywords, you're going to find most of the second aorists are composed of those. And words that are used less often usually build the aorists using the first aorist method, which is regular. So if you know the present tense stem of a verb and it takes a first aorist, you can work it out without having to know that the root is different. It's actually built on the same root as the present tense. Okay, questions? No questions. Class dismissed. Go, Lucy.
It's going back again to the imperfect tense, since I missed all those classes. Asso, verbs ending in asso, can that also apply to verbs ending in like uso or eso?
So verbs ending in sigma, sigma, omicron.
Yeah. Or sigma,
omega,
yeah.
sorry, yeah.
Omega, yeah.
I
like
don't know off the top of my head. Keruso. All right, yeah, it always helps to have an actual example. Keruso, clearly. Oh, sorry, I'm back into my little gadget here. So let me share that. Right, guys, we are done. If you want to stick around for the answers to some of your assignment questions, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, you're welcome to go. Those who faithfully submitted already, like Douglas, will be jealous. All right, so Keruso, let's again go into this dude. All right, so here's Keruso. Mounts classifies these as verbal roots ending in a vila, kappa, gamma, chi, add iota, consonantal iota, plus sigma sigma omega. Since the iota is added to form the present tense stem, the combination of kappa and chi with iota forms sigma sigma. By analogy, plaso comes from plat. All right, so let's see what falls into this grouping. Alaso, word I've never seen before. Drasomai, Eliso, Keruso, Maso, Nuso, Oruso, Plaso, Pleso, Praso, Ptuso, and Plureso. So these are all words that have originally had a root that ended in one of the velar consonants. And effectively have formed their present tense by adding the sigma sigma omega. So Keruso, yes, is one of them. Keruso, you can recognize, I'll type here, I don't know if you can read this when I type, but you can recognize
Yeah, okay.
erug. So kerygma,
Mm.
kerygmatic, well known in theological jargon, is a noun that's built on the same root. So in that form, kerygma, you actually see the gamma that is the root ending. But it has gone to sigma sigma in the present tense. Lucy, what I'm not sure I can say is that I can't say with confidence that any time you have a present tense stem that has this sigma sigma omega, you're looking at something that had a velar ending and has modified its root. But certainly a good number of them are doing that.
Okay. Yeah, the other question was ek place, which also fell into that list.
It did fall into that list, yeah.
And then
What
that one I
yeah.
wasn't sure whether the root would be ek plague or ek plug.
All right, so let's go and look for the answer. And there's the answer. All right, so a good way to look for the answer is to look at some of the other principal parts of the word. So our present tense stem is pleso. You see the sigma sigma omega and you think there's a fair chance that this has a root ending in a velar. If we look at the aorist tense, we see xa, which could form from just about any velar. This could be from plague plus sa, or it could be from a plague plus sa. They would behave the same way. So that doesn't tell me which of the velars has been used. But if I look to the right, I'm going to see in two of the other principal parts, I'm going to see the gamma sticking out. So I'm going to hazard a guess. The actual root of this word was plague plus consonantal iota. All right, which has then been used to form the principal parts. So we've gone to place in the present tense, plagues are in the aorist, a plague with appropriate modifiers in the perfect, etc. All right, so that probably is the best way to try and work this out, because you can't tell from looking at Plaso which of the velars was there. From the point of view of explaining what's happening, you don't need to. So if you were looking at this form and you didn't know which, was it gamma or chi that was lying under this in the root, it wouldn't matter as long as you recognized that one of the velars was there, and when combined with sigma has given me this form, you'd be fine.
Okay.
Okay, so from a point of view of recognizing what you're looking at, you don't need to. Good question. Have I answered your question?
Yes, but I wasn't sure whether the vowel was a eta or a alpha, because one of the forms I looked at in the mounts, it looked like plug might have been the stem.
Oh, I'm with you. Why would the stem vowel have lengthened throughout? Let's see if he tells us anything. Ekpleso, epipleso. Do we have a form that has plug?
Let me look it up in the textbook.
Splachnizomai, that's not it. We do have a verb plaso. So we've got plaso, which appears to have a stem that ends in kappa. It looks like the original stem was pluck.
Okay.
He says it's from the root plut. That follows the pattern by analogy. Okay. Doesn't matter terribly much. I mean, you're not wanting to use these words yourself, so you can sort of see the pattern.
In the lexicon for our textbook, ekpleso has as the last word, I can't remember which form it is, echeplagain.
Okay, I'm going to go and have a look. Ekpleso. Ekpleso, I am amazed. That links me to this, by the way, which is nifty. Okay, so X eplesomain, nothing there. X eplagain. All right, here, that is the future. No, that's the aorist passive, and aorist passives do behave a little strangely. Okay, we're not going to see that root. Does he explain it? All right, so here we have it with the eta retained, but here we have a form with the eta having moved. See what we get. Ekpleso. The Attic form was ekplato. That happens quite often. You have quite a few words that in different dialects of Greek used to swap double tau for double sigma. Exeplexa, only passive. Exeplesomain, exeplagain. So there's the one you spotted. All right, I don't know why it's gone to alpha in the aorist passive, but it does appear to be consistently eta through all the other forms. So I would stick with the theory that the stem vowel here is in fact pleso, ekplace or ekplague, and try and explain it on that premise, and maybe we look for a reason why in this particular one the second aorist has reverted to alpha. Notice, by the way, that if we look at the root pleso, from which that was clearly built, even in this one, the aorist passive retains the eta as the stem vowel. So I don't know why it's changed in that one. That's very weird.
Okay.
Okay. Good questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Lucy. We'll chat again next week, God willing. Thanks for sticking around, Vic.
Thank you,
Blessings
Kevin.
to you.
I see you're still live. So the people will have a nice extra few minutes. I'm going. I'm just hoping that everything's well with you and your mother. Thank you very much for coming on and still doing the class. Appreciate it.
Only a pleasure. Blessings to you.
Shalom.
Bye, guys.